Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, honored guest Ed. Whether you like it or not, you are faced with a barrage of decisions every single day, just one after the other. As human being, you are essentially a decision-making machine. These just come at you over and over again. The better you are at making these decisions, the better directions you can take your life. And the worse you are, the worse decisions you can take your life. Sometimes the stakes in these decisions are really small. Sometimes the stakes are tremendous. What should we get for dinner tonight? Where should we go this weekend? Where should we move? Where should my kids go to school? Who should I marry? All of these decisions will have a tremendous impact on your path. So it's very valuable to figure out how to get better at it if you can. So that's what I want to talk about today. I think it's really valuable, especially in tough decisions that you have to think about a lot, to have some sort of a framework or like a mental model to think about the decision and give you some confidence that you are going in the right direction and handling it in as best as you can. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the common traps to avoid as well. So my framework for thinking about decisions is actually pretty simple on the surface. You have to make a decision, it comes at you, you got to decide. There's basically two things that you have to consider: benefits and costs. Benefits are good things that'll happen if you make this particular decision. Costs are the bad things that'll happen. And benefits and costs, you can subdivide those into two subcategories when you're trying to figure those things out. There's probability, so the chance that the good thing or the bad thing will happen, and impact, which is how good it is or how bad it is. You combine all those factors together to figure out what the benefits and the costs are. If the benefits are greater than the cost, then do it. If they aren't, then don't do it. If you're in one of those situations where you're choosing between multiple options and you have to pick one, do the benefits and costs of each one, and then figure out which one has the highest ratio of benefits to cost. It sounds fairly simple, but it's actually really deceptively hard to apply. And I think a lot of people probably use this model subconsciously to some extent when they're making decisions, but it's really actually hard to apply because we're human beings. We're not computers. We're not all-knowing gods. We don't know what all the benefits are. We don't know what all the costs are. We don't know how to do the calculations. Our minds are extremely limited. But that being said, I think it is valuable to still have the model because we can get better. And it's also good to keep in mind some of the common failure modes that you can have when making decisions. So I noticed two. There's an infinite number of failure modes when you're making decisions, but I would say I want to talk about two in particular that I've noticed that you can keep an eye out for. One of them is not valuing your time. So I remember very clearly in my university days, several years back, the university would have a free pancake day. And I distinctly remember people lining up in an 1.5 to 2 hour queue to get free pancakes. Obviously, you see where this is going. The pancakes are by no means free. You spend an 1.5 to 2 hours in line wasting your life. Your time would have been far better spent doing something else, studying probably if you're in university, spending time with your girlfriend, spending time with whoever, doing something more fun than waiting in line for pancakes. So you might ask, how much should you value your time then? There could be a lot of reasonable debate about that. I can't really give a specific number. The point is that it's worth something, and if you do value your time, I think it'll change. You'll see a change in your decision making if you never really fully considered it before. One rule of thumb I use, I think, take your hourly wage at work, whatever that is, and that's a pretty good number, I think, to value your time. But pick a number, something greater than 0. Mistake number 2 is focusing purely on money or things that can be quantified. the attraction of money and things that can be quantified is that they're really easily measurable, and it can make a decision seem like it's easier than it is. Oh, this costs more than this, so I'm going to go with this, and that's that. But often that works, and it's good to quantify things if you can, but there are many things in life, many things, where the stakes are huge. You should be incorporating the cost or benefit, but maybe people are less likely to because it's not as easily quantifiable. So a few good examples would be health and wellness is one category. I think that is hard to quantify. You don't really know, it's hard to quantify, say for example, your mood increase that could result from exercising, or your physical appearance, or even something that's a hard number like the number of years that you're going to live. Exercising is going to extend that. You don't really know how much, and it's kind of a subtle benefit as well. So that's one area where I think there are a lot of benefits or costs that are overlooked. Another one would be relationships with loved ones. We are social creatures. We need contact with other people. We need to be friends with other people. We need to love. We need to be loved. And so relationships are something that are very important and you don't want to overlook in decision making. So, for example, I personally think it would be a very poor decision, all else equal, if you cut off ties with a family member because of a $100 dispute. Maybe even $1,000 or $2,000 dispute. If you've had a good relationship with them otherwise, that's probably a poor decision. So relationships are not something that you want to overlook. Another area would be culture or morale. So especially in a workplace, maybe some of you have heard this in your workplace, something like this. We can't fire Sarah. Sure, she's a sociopath. She has no morals. She makes everyone in the office miserable, but damn it, is she good at her job? So obviously, that's overlooking the impact on culture, the impact that has on the other people in the organization. Hopefully it's not that extreme, but it's something that should be considered in decision making. So those are my 2 tips. Decisions are very hard. We're never going to be good at making decisions. We're never going to be perfect at making decisions. But if you have a mental framework at your side and you're aware of some of the common failures, you can feel good that you're doing the best you can with what you have. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, and fellow Toastmasters and our guest. Mark, you gave the speech again on how to make decisions. You gave a great opening to set up what you were going to talk about. I loved your use of the word barrage. Some of the things that you had specifically asked me to pay attention to were your hand gestures. And you had some very good moments of very effective hand gestures. I like how when you were doing over and over, you had that kind of thing. It really gives that sense of what you're talking about. And you really had some very natural movements happening throughout. There was one thing, I can't remember exactly the words you were saying, but you were placing things out like this, and then you did it again, and it just perhaps felt a little much doing it twice through there, too repetitive. So that's something, just finding that balance of having natural movements and sometimes shaping what you're saying, but also not being too repetitive with it. You had some great facial expression and vocal variation, especially when you were making the lists of decisions that you were talking about. One thing, you were making points of eye contact, but I felt that it was just very quick and never really connected with anyone when you were talking. So I feel that you should, if you are going to talk to someone, land on them for a little bit before moving on, because it just flitted all over and then looked just like you were wandering restlessly, didn't know who to look at. You had some nice touches of humor in your speech, like the psychopath. So I think everyone enjoyed that one. Sometimes when you're coming to the ends of sentences, your voice dies down a little bit. Now this could be, there are a few causes, so you can figure out what it is. One of them, just as being a language coach, as a singing coach, one thing we were taught about different languages is English is a front-heavy language, so quite often the main idea is said at the beginning, and so then it's easy to die off at the end, but we want to keep it strong to the end. So that's one thing that it could possibly be, but other things for you to consider are, is it your breath support that's not allowing you to get to the end, or are you already thinking about your next thought? So just trying to figure that out. But overall, it was a very good, well laid out speech, and it was great to hear this speech again. Lots of great advice in it. Thank you. You delivered it with much more confidence this time.